There was an insane amount of support and likes on the last Gigantamax video, so we've got some more lined up for you all, and we're starting things off with some Gigantamax pre-evolutions for Sword and Shield. With Pokemon like Pikachu and Eevee getting their own Gigantamax forms, we continue our stroll through Gigantamax topics and look at those Pokemon who do evolve, but completely ignore their evolutions and blow up into bigger versions of their own. Today we'll look at 10 Pokemon that could use a little push in the upwards direction to stand out as their own beautiful selves and say, hey, I don't need to evolve to grow, I can show up with my own Gigantamax forms. And that's how pre-evolutions gained their own spotlight in Generation 8. Number 10, Buneary. We've heard about the birds and the bees, what about the bunnies and the fleas? Give it a Gigantamax form. Buneary seems like one of those popular picks that could fit right in with Pikachu and Eevee as a staple for what constitutes a pre-evolved Gigantamax form. Eevee seems like a static design concept for how you'd grow Buneary as well. Fluff of little patches of differently colored fur on Buneary's ears and legs, and give it the cry of a demon spawn. That's basically an equation for a full Gigantamax pre-evolved Pokemon. The formula for these types of Gigantamax Pokemon seems to be which have a bit of nuance or popularity that they'd stand out to be a more lovable creation than a powerful one compared to their evolutions. And then there's Meowth, where they thought they should just get out a pasta stretcher and never stop. Buneary seems to have that silly feeling to see it grow into a massive version of itself, along with it being more of a standoutish Pokemon in Generation 4 that could really suit the form change. Lopunny already has a Mega Evolution, and maybe it's not the most memorable one. However, the two rabbits seem to be in their own gradient of popularity, with the more cute, yet to evolve bunny, and the please don't Google me evolve form. Let's just Gigantamax that previous, more innocent version as a reminder of how cute some of these Pokemon end up being, as well as seeing how it suits onto a small bundle of joy like Buneary, compared to just making them all power fiends with explosive dex entries. Number 9, Misdreavus. With many Pokemon being evolved in later generations than their debut, there were quite a few that felt like pretty decent Pokemon even without one. It was still nice to see, of course, but with Gigantamax versions being given to Pokemon that do have evolutions, giving one to a Pokemon who was somewhat loved before it evolved seemed like a very fitting criteria to have for any Pokemon on this list. Misdreavus seems like one of those Pokemon from Generation 2 where you get it at the end of the game as sort of a treat for journeying to Mount Silver and seeing this rare to encounter Pokemon. Sneasel was also one of those Pokemon as well, but Misdreavus seemed like it would undertake that red glow as well as the changes to its design rather well with its own Gigantamax version. It also felt like one of those Pokemon you could add a more storied look onto with this mysterious demeanor and design. Extend its hair, shine up the pearls, and a little spirit could be a really nice addition to the Gigantamax family. As well as a real talked about one, as Misdreavus has both that proper, somewhat completed look for a Pokemon that does evolve, especially seeing as it didn't for a whole generation, and could spark a good reaction even when it gets a form, without its evolution doing the same. Number 8, Galarian Meowth. If there's anything to elongate here, it has to be Galarian Meowth's beard. You're making a towering Meowth of its original version. Mind you, it's the most random Pokemon to pick out of the 3 Generation 1 Pokemon that were picked. You stretch it like pizza dough, and then you make a new form for the Pokemon that has a Viking's beard without giving that a Gigantamax form? I mean, you have to give it a 50-foot beard, that's just unacceptable. If we're making troll Pokemon forms, then the little bearded cat needs a form as well. Let's just forget about Alolan Meowth, we can move along from that. But Meowth without gigantic Galarian Meowth? Now that's a lost opportunity. You could even give it a spear if you're ignoring its evolutions. I don't think Berserker would mind, just have the beard sway from side to side a little as it skyscrapers over the opposing foe. Maybe its Gigantamax move could lower accuracy too. That's a lot of hair. You get hit by that and you're gonna be scratching your eyes for a little while. This is just the number 1 Gen 8 Pokemon pre-evolution that needed to be given a form if original Gen 1 Meowth was getting one as well. Number 7, Poipole. While Ultra Beasts in general look like the type of Pokemon who would be their own breed of DLC expansion Pokemon and given their own packaged Gigantamax forms like a specifically branded card pack, Meganadel manages to be the only Ultra Beast with a pre-evolution and a spotlighted one at that. Poipole comes in as a completely different design from Meganadel, and a Gigantamax form could really show off what it could have been if it kept the pure poison, along with the looks of a humanoid alien, and would manage to give it a somewhat glimpse into a pseudo-type of evolution with Poipole in its new form. Not to mention there's the fact that it states it was a starter Pokemon in an alternate universe. That'd be cool, we could have a technical starter Pokemon pre-evolution Gigantamax form. I mean, Pikachu is technically one as well, and technically so is Eevee, but maybe Poipole can slide in that regard too. It can also sufficiently relax the feeling of worrying about getting a non-fully evolved start of the Pokédex starter Pokemon Gigantamax too. I mean, what happens if Charmander and Charmeleon get Gigantamax forms next? Will it just be an endless loop of expansions where we need more DLC for Wartortle and Ivysaur after that? There will be riots. Just give it to the nicely toned Poipole who can give us that starter-like Pokemon feelings with a nice, yet differently designed look from its awesome evolution, and that's a good base for a pre-evolved Gigantamax Pokemon. Number 6. Joltik. Now hear me out. What if this gets smaller? Gigantamax? What about Min-Max? There's not many super tiny Pokemon to really see as a slightly comical yet caring form to be given. You got Fat Pikachu and Stretch Meowth. But what about one of the smallest Pokemon there is being blown up into a form so big you won't accidentally step on it? Out of all the super small Pokemon, Joltik manages to become not only a really neat catch, but also a super cute one that was close to being the Generation 5 Snom without the popularity. There can be currents flowing around it, webs to be shot, and a 4-inch creature blowing up into a giant in physicality, but small at heart. Joltik really suits the idea of having one of the tiniest Pokemon to Gigantamax, and makes for a delightful gimmick. Number 5. Mime Jr. When your family just ditches you to become Eskimos and leaves you behind as your own little self, not knowing how to traverse the land of snow, then you know what needs to be done. You need to Gigantamax into your own form as proof you too can change. This is just one of those comeback stories that needs to be made. How do you bring in a completely new pre-evolution for Mr. Mime in Generation 4, and when it gets a new form and evolution, its baby becomes left behind? This is just a poor statement for baby Pokemon everywhere. Being forgotten, weaker versions, sometimes only slightly cuter and not always the most prominently desired branch, but to just leave Mr. Mime out is a low blow. Having a Gigantamax would be both a very nice way of remembering the little guy, as well as giving it something so it doesn't need its own Galarian form patched in. Who needs Galarian Mime Jr. when we can get Mime XL? Number 4. Marill. Of all the Pikachu clones, Marill manages to set itself aside as a bit of a different one, even though it may have tried to take over the second gen as the new Pikachu. So did Elekid, however, in that little sketch before the Pokemon 2000 movie, so I guess we can forgive Game Freak for having these insider Pokemon trying to take over our beloved Pikachu. Marill, however, manages to set itself aside from Pikachu clones and lets itself look like it could be a completed Gigantamax form that's good on its own, but also in competition with Fat Pikachu. Can have the rivaling duo between Tracy and Ash's signature Pokemon being put into the spotlight, blown out of proportion, and taking each other on with dietary freedom. I feel Marill has managed to set a good precedent for itself as its own popular Pokemon, and in a different category of Pikachu clones, while still being its own great Pokemon without the need for its evolution to carry the whole line. It does get some nice additions with its own baby Pokemon in a later generation, and being given a type change when Fairy was introduced, but a Gigantamax form would be awesome to highlight the slightly overshadowed Pokemon that could have a lot more going for it and make it look like even more of a fairy. Number 3. Togepi. Speaking of people's signature Pokemon, we got Ash's Pikachu, Tracy's Marill, what about Misty's Togepi? That's the full Gen 2 trio, minus Brock. And with Togepi being another Pokemon to really be one of the more popular unevolved Pokemon, it seems to fit the trend of how most pre-evolved Pokemon either end up as giant balls of cute fun or somewhat comedic jokes. You've seen Toxel Dynamax and start to cry? Maybe Togepi needs a bit of a gigantic makeover to match those tears. Tantrum, anyone? Nothing quite reminds you of the anime like Togepi crying because Misty doesn't date Ash. Togekiss is probably another one of those sought-after Gigantamax picks, however the form would be in contention between these two. I think Togepi manages to start the evolution line off rather well, popping out of an egg, looking cute and happy, not crying immediately but you know it's coming, and deserves a fun, not focused on power form. There's always those little Pokemon that pop up in Generation that stand out as static reminders of that generation, and Togepi manages to be a frontrunner for Generation 2. And ahead in the line of pickups for a pre-evolved silly Gigantamax version, where it's a more rounded hard-boiled egg popping out of its shell as a huge Togepi. Number 2. Jigglypuff. I will admit, Pikachu and Eevee seem like the most characteristically chosen picks for a Pokemon that doesn't evolve, but is given a Gigantamax form. Meowth, however, well actually there's Meowth from Team Rocket, so I'll give them that. If we're ordering iconic, evolving Pokemon pre-evolutions, then we've got Pikachu, Eevee, Meowth, and then after that is Jigglypuff. Who else is running around in the anime drawing things on people's faces? Not Meowth, that's right. You could really just have Jigglypuff Gigantamax into an inflated version of itself, but give it its marker as a microphone to put everyone to sleep with its vocal G-Max move. Maybe you could have multiple Jigglypuffs fly around each other like in Pokemon Snap. Basically we could have that, but as double cost son from Yu-Gi-Oh! So a little bit more morbid with this Jigglypuff fusion. Jigglypuff just seems like one of the most suitable picks, with only Generation 1 Pokemon being picked for non-evolved Gigantamax forms, and being 4th in the line of notable unevolved Generation 1 Pokemon is not something to scoff at, and manages to be a little rewarding achievement that Jigglypuff can have for itself. Number 1. Riolu. You know the baby form to Lucario that some people end up forgetting? Maybe we highlight the little lovable pup and give it its own form to somewhat match Mega Lucario. It can get its own cloak too. Maybe get the one-off Galarian Slowking and have that wrapped around Riolu's little neck. You could have it look like a little lost and wandering canine trying to find its place in the Pokemon world. Riolu just seems like a small Pokemon that does get hidden behind how popular Lucario is, and giving it a form that doesn't change too much, but brings it into the spotlight would be a lot for this little guy. I think the overall design for a Gigantamax form for a Pokemon like this would probably match what a Tyrogue concept would be given as well. You could have those two little wandering fighters trying to see what they grow up into, and then be given some Lone Ranger type cloaks and old western hats with little straps to hold their mini guns in as they choose between evolving into their popular evolutions or staying their own little selves and fighting the good fight as little fighters. Riolu always seemed like it could be one of those Pokemon with some cosmetic changes like hat form Pikachus, except with scarves. Why not give it a neck scarf? That's good enough to spotlight this little guy. It just feels like Gigantamax pre-evolved Pokemon really suit a Pokemon like Riolu and would do justice to a great Pokemon like this. Wild West Riolu could be here to stay.